Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's check out the making of Karateka running on Nintendo Switch. Now this documentary, I guess, I don't know if we really call it a game per se, although there are games in here, but this is the third in this series of documentaries that Digital Eclipse has made. I think they did the Atari collection 50-year anniversary. I forget what the first one was, but yeah, so this is part education and then part game, part historical preservation. Karateka, I remember playing personally when I was in 6th grade. I think we had like 2 Apple IIs in our school, and if you were extra well behaved, you could play on some of the games on the Apple II. I think I played like Oregon Trail and this, and I think that's it. Actually, I think I played Oregon Trail in this game. So yeah, I actually have quite a few memories of this game personally. But this is not like it's an ongoing, continuing series. So I don't, unless you're a certain age and were part of the the crew that were playing PC games, not just PC games on the Apple II, then you maybe have never even heard of this. I think they did make some conversions. I remember there being a version on the 7800, which I think they have on here. But the original I played was on the old green screen, single color, just black and green Apple II. Anyway, if we look here, the making of a masterpiece. How did a teenager with an Apple II design one of the most influential games of all time? Explore the making of Jordan Mechner's Karateka below, or view the games menu with why. So let's look at the why. Let's look at the games they have. They have the original one from the Apple II. They have the Commodore 64 version. And then this is the Atari 800 version, 400, 800 XLE, which is basically the 1700 version. There's a Karateka remastered. That's new remastered. Death Bounce Rebounded. Oh, interesting. Death Bounce Prototype, 1982. Huh? Wow. We got prototypes. And then the prototype for the for Karateka. Asteroid Blaster, Star Blaster. All right. Well, let's check out at least the first chapter, and then we'll look at some games. So this is Chapter 1, Death Bounce. At first, Jordan Mechner wanted to create an arcade-style shooter. The lesson he learned from its rejection would inspire the creation of Karateka. Well, I guess we'll do 2 chapters, since we're not even talking about Karateka on the first chapter. Dreams of Stardom, teenage programming prodigy Jordan Mechner. Yes, same Jordan Mechner from Prince of Persia. So this was before Prince of Persia. Didn't want to wait around to get in the video game industry. Not when he had an Apple II and a dream of striking it rich. He just needed a killer idea. Introduction: playing the movies. In 1984, Broderbund released the debut game of a young developer named Jordan Mechner. Karateka would prove to be one of the most influential games of the era, inspiring a generation of designers with its many groundbreaking leaps in cinematic techniques, animation, story, characters, and music. Very true. People don't even realize how important this game is.
This is a MediaMate, and it contains a bunch of 5 1/4 inch discs. There's a lot of classics in here, including Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, which inspired us later. And just behind that is the game Karateka.
Hold on. Yes, show captions.
Love it. It's so good.
I remember seeing Karateka and wanting it, and then not have enough money to buy it.
So, this is a MediaMate, and it contains a bunch of 5 1/4 inch discs. There's a lot of classics here, including Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, which inspired us later. And just behind that is the game, Karateka. Love it. It's so good.
I remember seeing Karateka and wanting it, and then not have enough money to buy it. But I think I saved up some money, and I eventually went back and got it. I was sold on the box artwork alone. Kind of told a story. I remember the illustration was really well done, and again, just kind of told a story of what that game was. And yeah, eventually I picked it up and started playing it.
When I first loaded it up, what I expected was something down the lines of Karate Champ or similar head-to-head beat-em-ups. Instead, what I got was a cinematic experience. That's what blew my mind, right? The fact that it started with, a text crawl, right out of, which to my mind, that was right out of Star Wars, right? That cinematic experience is the thing that was just amazing, right? It was the most movie-like experience I'd ever had in a video game at that point.
It really felt like, you're a karate hero in a movie. That's fantastic. All the other things that feel like bleeps and bloops, and this is like, movie making. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was just very impressed by the fluidity of the animation. And the kicks look great. The punches look great. They were always capped off with a little bit of a sound, a little kia. Yeah, the fluidity of the motion, I think, really set the stage for the rest of what I had consumed about that game.
The animation was cool, and that was very innovative, obviously, at the time. The process.
Yeah, I know folks nowadays are going to have a hard time understanding how a game that looks so primitive could be influential, especially with animation and motion capture being so prevalent in the industry, and things, at least from certain studios, looking very close to lifelike. Even if they can't quite match the color depth and the structure of a person's face, they can capture the animation of how they walk and how they move and how they converse and all the little incidental pieces of animation that we associate as smooth movement. Things like Karateka really were not available at the time when this game was released.
And the beginning of animation getting better and better and better, right? And more cinematic. Taking cues from the movie industry. But I think the storytelling was probably one of the first. I can't think of another game at the time that had that element to it.
The characters were not little sets of pixels. They, in fact, were fully formed individuals. They had personalities. They had strengths and weaknesses. You've got to remember the level of graphics that people were doing at that time, and they were on the sophisticated side for that time.
Karateka was historically a very significant game, and it saw the future before anybody else did. Part of it was because it understood the language of cinema, that visuals mattered, that full motion mattered, that human beings and characters and characterization, and storytelling and music mattered in a way that we take for granted now when we see games that are at least as complex as films.
A common knock against a lot of game developers today is that they want to be movie makers. But gosh, you could almost look at Karateka as sort of the original apple from the tree of knowledge there. It was really, in a lot of ways, the first game that put together fluidity of motion, cinematic shots, story arc, twists, filmic language, and pointed the way towards a marriage of film movie style storytelling and gameplay.
Okay, so with that little bit, obviously I don't want to do like the entire documentary. But let's look at the original. This is the one that I would have played. This is December 1984. Yeah, obviously I didn't play it when it first came out. I wasn't quite old enough to be in 6th grade at this time. But let's look at this. The original version of Karateka, designed and programmed by Jordan Mechner, its cinematic camera, storyline sequences, and smooth rotoscoped animation made Karateka like no other computer game at the time. Very true. Although the Apple II's high-resolution graphics mode could only display 6 colors, Jordan was still able to use the limited color palette to great effect. Notes like watch, then turn on commentary to hear a commentary track from Jordan and Francis Mechner. See how this is going to control. This will be interesting. High atop a craggy cliff, guarded by an army of fierce warriors, stands the fortress of the evil warlord Akuma. Deep in the darkest dungeon of the castle, Akuma gloats over his lovely captive, the Princess Mariko. You are one trained in the way of karate, a karateka. Alone and unarmed, you must defeat Akuma and rescue the beautiful Mariko. Put fear and self-concern behind you. Focus your will on your objective, accepting death as a possibility. This is the way of the karateka. So even back in these days, look at the booty on that girl. Of course you're going to try to rescue that. Oh, did I hit the wrong button? I must have hit the wrong button. Yeah, so your punches and kicks can be high, mid, or low. Your punches do more damage, but you have to be getting much, much closer. Let's see, how do we stand? There we go. Oop. Run. There's a little cool sequence here. You run towards your opponent. Then it briefly flashes back to your opponent's perspective. And you get closer and closer. Yeah, of course, I didn't play it on a color monitor. Our school only had the black and white or the green and white monochrome monitor. So seeing color in this version is a little surprising to me. And we get that little cool cinematic showing them coming at each other. Oh, then the bird gets me. I forgot about the bird. He must have pecked my balls off. I mean, he took almost all my health. Or, I mean, he took the rest of my health. Okay, so yeah, that was the original. That was the version I played. Although, again, I played my version in green and black. So again, seeing this in color is pretty interesting to me. Yeah, then we have the Commodore 64 version. I never played this one. The Atari 8-bit one. Yeah, I did own a Atari computer in. I think they own an 800 XL, but I never owned this game. Let's check out the. Okay. Well, I was about to say we're gonna check out the Commodore 64 version of the game, but maybe there's something wrong with it. I see this game is not the most stable. It's pretty rare to get a game that'll actually crash to the title screen or the game selection screen, much less crash. Period. So very, very unusual. But that is also maybe keeping in the spirit of the original games too. As PC games during this era of gaming, not highly known for being stable. Let's try that again. I don't imagine it being that much different. It's like Robert cooked it this version. Yeah, it runs quite a bit slower, doesn't it? I wouldn't say the graphics are necessarily any better either. I mean, thankfully the animation's still smooth, but yeah, it does run significantly slower than the Apple II version. Okay, yeah, interesting. I mean, it's still the same game. I'm just surprised that it runs worse. And then I imagine this one is the worst version because it was not great, especially after I'd played it as the especially after I played it on the Apple II. Playing it on the 800 XL was, or at least playing the 7800 version, which the 7800 is based on the 800 series of computers. I remember being very disappointed by it, but maybe this version is different. Let's see. Oh yeah, this version is different. That part, strangely, coming to a stop is more responsive than the Apple II version. Okay, so this one seems like it moves a bit faster as far as the fighting goes. The start and stop animations move a little quicker. In fact, it takes a little getting used to. All right. Oh, stop it there. Yeah. I actually kind of like this one the most. Strangely enough. Let's see. When Veda Cook ported Karateka to the Atari 8-bit computer platform, she was able to take advantage of the faster processing speed to create a more fluid, responsive version of Karateka. Oh, okay. Well, that would explain it. It just felt better on the Atari, Cook would later say. It may have been the best port for quite a while. Yeah, I agree. I mean, going from the 64 to the Apple II, I mean, this one is quite a bit better. More responsive, at least. All right, the remastered 2023, huh? I don't even know how you remaster this. I guess we'll find out. Oh, going with the old low-res font, okay. I don't call using old low-res font remastering, personally. There we go. Oh, this looks like straight out of the Jaguar era, the 32-bit era. Still blocky, but more color, a little more definition. Oh, I'm surprised they didn't add narration. Thought for sure a remaster would put that in there. Yeah, this definitely feels like a long lost 32-bit port. Again, I know a modern audience is going to have a very hard time understanding this game and understanding what a big deal it was. But yeah, I mean, 1984, I mean, gaming was not very sophisticated. Animation, you know, you'd be lucky to get 2 or 3 frames of animation. Oh, wow, look at this thing going. Look at this thing go. Interesting. Turn the commentary on. Yeah, why not, huh? Turn the scan lines off. One life. Nice and okay, we have achievements. Oh, gosh, it is very modern. Our princess. Still serving cake on a platter. Thank goodness. Don't know if a princess would choose to just put her face straight on the floor. A bench right there, but you know, I'm sure she was exhausted.
Hello, I'm Mike Micah, president of Digital Eclipse, and I'm here to talk about the remastering of Karateka. How do you pronounce the game? That's the fun part of this whole thing. And one of the fun parts for me going into this was listening to how everybody pronounces the game that I work with.
It's Karateka.
I pronounce it, and I've always pronounced
Like
it.
karate.
I say this all the time, is Karateka.
Part of the base word.
But then
Or
I forgot to
karate.
say Karateka,
Karatea.
Karateka, and Karateka in other ways. But Karateka is the way I've said it, and I think I've run into more people who say it like I do than any other way. But honestly, ultimately, it's up to Jordan, and Jordan pronounces it, and I might get this wrong, but he pronounces it Karateka.
Karatea, huh? I mean, yeah, if you're pronouncing karate the way karate is supposed to be pronounced, sure. Ooh, we got enemies with different colored pants and shirts. Amazing. They still got little flags for hands. We got some background animation. They kept the gameplay the same though, so it's a little awkward doing punches and kicks.
Karateka is one of my favorite games of all time. I've even tried to port the game probably 33 years ago now, I think, when I was still in high school, to the Commodore Amiga. So for me, it was a lot of unfinished business. I wanted to get back to porting Karateka. And approaching this project, one of the things that kind of excited me and interested me most was why, outside of the holy trinity of versions of Karateka, did all the other ports just suck.
True
And
story.
I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that people didn't really understand it, or didn't have the source code, or they were just in a completely different frame of mind for this sort of game. Without specifically calling out certain platforms and certain games, what really kind of stood out to me is that people who tried to port Karateka previously approached it in a way that was very common back in the day. Very simple gameplay, very state-driven, the antithesis of cinematic, which is kind of the purpose of Karateka. It's meant to be a movie you play, and their approach was to take a game and make it feel more arcadey and feel very immediate, and as a result, it was just very unnatural and very, very hard to play.
Yeah, it definitely describes like the 7800 version. The version was such a disaster for a system which really should have had an NA's port of that game.
The gate was just a large graphic on the Apple II, and it was just impossible to move it around. You couldn't really scroll it very quickly. But it was also a really iconic moment in the game, because when you arrive at the castle, you meet the guard and there's the gate, and that's just like every screenshot of the old Karateka game is pretty much that. And because Jordan wanted to make it parallax, there's some interesting challenges here, because I wanted to draw the gate like he would draw it on the Apple II. So I actually do line draws like you would on an Apple II. So that gate is not a 3D object. It's actually using the same kind of routines that Jordan used, but to draw it in that parallaxing way. So I wanted to approach it the same way that Shoplifter and Jordan intended to draw that gate, being parallax in 3D. So it's not a 3D object, but the other thing that came out of it was the gate served as a sort of break in the gameplay of the original game, so it could show a cutscene. And he mainly did that because he needed to load data into the game, and so it was a clever way to get data to load back and forth and use that break to take advantage of that. Since we didn't have that anymore, it seemed really odd to be going through this 3D gate and then have it stop and go to a cutscene. It just didn't fit anymore. So going back over the game and reading through the journals again, there was some more stuff he wanted to do cinematically with the game. Particularly, I believe, whether in conversation or in his book, he talked about having the guard start running toward Akuma to go tell him, and you see that. So this is an opportunity to have that happen. So when you get past the gate and you encounter the next player or the next enemy, when you take down that enemy, that's when the cutscene triggers, and you see the other one guard going the opposite direction to go run up to tell Akuma that somebody's arrived, and so I was able to capture that moment too. If I approach this as it being just a modern PC remaster, that's already been done. There was already another Karateka that was kind of a modern take on Karateka. My fascination sat with the idea that I wanted to figure out what the obstacles were to people who were porting the game and try to understand why that was so challenging. Because I think when you first look at Karateka, on its surface, you're like, all right, one-on-one combat, very simple mechanics, that should be easy to do. But it really isn't. And when you start digging into Jordan's code, you start to realize he had created basically the perfect clockwork version of a fighting game that was very cinematic, but on top of that, he had spent a couple years really optimizing everything to just work perfectly. If you just move one byte this way or one byte that way, the game breaks. And it was like the ultimate optimization. For me to approach this then and try to port it, it's easy to do a port to a modern system because you can do anything you want. It's like, it's beyond the scope or the realm of anything else that you would need to worry about. There's no limitations, so you don't have to optimize. So in my mind, I wanted to go back and kind of approach it in the way that the team that ported Prince of Persia, Jordan's other game, did to the PC, the VGA PC. That was a version, if you look at the Apple II version, you look at the PC version, they're very different, and they play great, but the PC version is like this, it's a system that had so much more power, yet showed restraint, and kind of worked within the limitations of what the original platform was so that it retained the feel and look of that original game. So for me, I created basically a fantasy platform. I created what was essentially like a VGA PC or an Amiga, very similar to the machine I originally tried to port this game to many years ago. I approached it like that. So I created my own system with its own limitations so that I had a target platform that I could take the original game and try to make it work on. And from that, I was hoping I would find all these obstacles that everybody else ran into.
Guy taking his job too seriously. My goodness.
The approach to the animation in the newer version of Karateka had to be very delicately handled because we did not want to remove or change any of the keyframes of the original game. By doing that, it suddenly wasn't Karateka anymore. It really had to be his father, and everything else that he rotoscoped had to stay retained in there. So what we had to do then was to make sure that those were retained, but everything in between had to be an interpolation. And we could have just used AI, we could have used any other ways to generate that animation, but it just didn't look natural. So the best approach was literally going in by hand and figuring out the weight and the distance and the travel of every bit of motion and look at those frames back and forth until you could figure out a trajectory for the in-between frames and just by hand draw those frames in. And thankfully, the game doesn't have a lot of color. Even the new version doesn't have a lot of color. So that reduced the amount of work. You can hide a lot of detail in the white of his gi. And the other costumes in the game have a lot of solid color space. So you can hide a lot of movement there and insinuate movement without doing much. So it really just kind of worked out.
Okay, why don't we stop it there? This is Audapostrophe. You've been watching the making of Karateka running on Nintendo Switch. Again, you can get this on the on every platform. I think it's on every platform. I didn't check the Xbox store, but I'm pretty sure it's there. So this is kind of a nice documentary slash game museum covering both Karateka and the earlier games from Jordan. I think it's pretty fascinating. This remake, I think it's pretty good. Keeps the spirit of the original game, plus also adding technology behind it. The commentary track is also nice. Seeing the philosophy behind making a game. It's a kind of insight that you don't normally get. Even long form interviews don't really cover it in detail the way that they cover it here. I think it's worth checking out. It's $20. It is like a slice of history. And it'll be a slice of history that I think a lot of gamers really haven't experienced unless you're of a certain age. I feel that these games they still hold up, just with the understanding that you're not going to get lightning fast responses even in the remake. It's a much more metered kind of game, but you can really see how this game would inspire future future designers and directors and sound artists for the games that they would make, after they play this one. So it's good stuff. Check it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.